Hey y'all, welcome to a Linode tutorial. My name is PJ Metz. I'm going to be walking you through my Twitter bot and how I hosted it on a Linode Nanode Ubuntu instance. Follow me. So first, we're looking at my Twitter bot that I wrote in node.js. This is a Super Nintendo bot that I created. Personally, I'm a kid of the 90s. I don't know if you can tell. But I really enjoyed my Super Nintendo. I remember getting it in the third grade, and all that music was especially what was so exciting to me. It was just such a leap in technological ability for the music from the regular Nintendo to the Super Nintendo. So this is a Twitter bot that I created called SNES Soundtracks, and it's based on my love of Super Nintendo music. I remember when I got the Super Nintendo in the third grade in 1993, that one of the things I fell in love with was the music of Super Mario World and Zelda especially, and so I wanted to make a bot that could share that with people every week. So we're going to talk about my bot very quickly, but then we're mostly going to move on to talking about how you're going to host this on Linode, because that's what's really important to y'all. That's what you're here for. If you're interested in learning the specifics of how and why I built the Twitter bot the way I did, you can find that in an article linked below. And let's walk through it real quick. So start with a console log. I always like to see in my logs that something indicates that it started, at least it turned on. I've got a little bit of logic here requiring the .env environment. That's where I keep all my Twitter keys and stuff like that. And this is where we start getting into using some of the NPMs that I needed for this project. Some of the NPMs I needed are, first off, Node Package Manager. If you don't have NPM, you can't use other NPMs. I use Twit to interface with the Twitter API. I also made sure I had Node on here since I'm using node.js. And then finally, something called Node Schedule. You can see here they have created what's called a schedule that has several rules included in it that say what day of the week, hour, and time zone something happens at. Now, this is going to be important later because this Twitter bot does two things. It tweets on the same time of the same day every week, once a week, and it responds to users. So in order to be able to do that first thing, tweet on a schedule, I had to create these rules using Node Schedule, which I found was a really straightforward way of doing. After that, I had to create an array to pull my soundtracks from. This was just the simplest solution for me. It's literally an array of YouTube videos that contain Super Nintendo soundtracks. And what happens is when the bot fires, either on a schedule or when you tag it and say please, it pulls something random from there and it tosses it back in a reply to you so you can get all the Super Nintendo music you want. So, created the array and then made a variable for its length, and then that's going to be useful later on when we're looking at the randomizer that we created with math.random. All of this stuff here from line 20 to 29 is stuff that you have to do with Twit. You're requiring Twit in this variable. You're requiring the config file that you have right here. And you're making a new object to connect to that API that requires the config file that has access to all of the keys to your Twitter account. So here in line 29, we set up a variable called stream that takes the Twitter object and a function in it or a method in it called stream, and passes in the SNES Soundtracks username, and it tracks that now. It's watching that specifically. And then when something happens that fits into this function, it fires off and runs its tweet. So with this function, we called it press start. First thing we do in this function is we have a math.floor, math.random little logic here that takes the length of the array and creates a number based on that. We do this inside the function because if we had done that up here around line 18, when we run our node.js program, it would have picked a number and it would have been that every single time. And it would just send out the exact same soundtrack to every single person. So in order to keep that from happening, it only happens when this function fires. We got a couple variables here, ID, text, name, and these are all related to the tweet that is passed into this function. So when a tweet comes in and passes into this function, it's got an ID in a string format. It's got text, which is the actual text of the tweet itself. And then we've got user and it's screaming. Now this is going to be important so you can actually reply to the person so the bot can reply to the person who tweeted at it. So this is some regex that we created on line 45. It looks for the word please anywhere in the tweet. If it finds it and it matches based on this right here, then player one becomes an array with something in it. That's what match does. Match creates an array with whatever is in here inside of it if it matches whatever you are connecting to it here. So because text is the text of the tweet, it takes exactly what the person tweeted, passes it in, runs the regex, and if it says please anywhere, it creates an array with please in it. Next, player two checks that player one, the array we just created, has a length greater than 0. Now this is important because if it's greater than 0, that means this worked. If it's 0, then this wouldn't have worked, and what you would have created is an empty array. Now we have to have this OR logic here because without that empty array, it crashes when we try to do the logic down here. So we needed this empty array as an OR if it doesn't have an actual match. Let's move on. I console log here because for me this is a very basic Twitter bot. This is not for high-level people. We're not as worried about security. We're not as worried about a few things. This is, I want to make a Twitter bot. I'm brand new, like I was when I created this. And I wanted you to say, hey, you can just look in the logs and you'll see. Console log, it prints out what's here. So you can start to see if the regex matched. You can see why maybe it didn't, and it makes it a little easier to try and figure out what's going wrong with your bot. All right, now we're getting into more logic. If the text does include SNES soundtracks, if you tagged it, and player two is true, which means there's something in that array, and remember there's only something in that array if it matches the regex, please, then we create a reply text that says @name, and remember name is the user who tweeted at the bot. And then we pull from our soundtrack array and we pass in soundtrack array element, which is a number created randomly up here, right? Once that happens, you've got reply text. That's the reply text that's going to be pushed into the tweet with t.post, status is an update, and then the status is going to be the reply text. Who's it in reply to? And all of this comes from twit. It's in reply to ID, which comes from up here on line 41. And then it passes in a function here called game over. And game over is basically tracking errors and replies. So if there is an error, it console logs the error message and says game over. So you can always look through your logs. If you see game over on the console log anywhere, you know that something went wrong up here in this particular section of your code. If that doesn't happen, I logged a Jurassic Park joke because I'm hilarious. So press start is a function that covers when people tweet at the bot. So that's just for replies. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. And then I want to look at press select. Select is my scheduled tweets. And that's going to go every Monday based on these rules. Day of the week is 1. That's a Monday. Rule hours, it's going to be at 10 o'clock. And the time zone is ETC. So if we're looking at this, press select does the same thing at the beginning. Creates a random number that we're going to use to pick from our array. Next, we've got the weekly reply text. It's going to be a little different. It says, here's your soundtrack for the week. It's going to make a post that has that as a status. And in here, we also have, you can see, is where we pulled from the array. So it gives you the YouTube link. It says, here's your soundtrack for the week. And then it passes in game over too. Now, because these are, if you remember in press start, I had game over, and this is game over too. You don't quite have to have them named differently. In fact, we could take this function and simply have it outside and have it once. But I was making sure that I'll just name it different. I like the idea of having things kind of the same way. Because again, when new people are doing this, we're learning. So I try and keep this at a lower, easier level. Make sure you have all of this inside this function rather than there's a function over here. We're going to pass it in. We're going to require something else. I wanted to keep it very simple and under 100 lines. That was important to me too. So once you've got the press select function, which covers the scenario in which we would tweet, we actually have to have it happen. So I created a variable here called job1. It takes schedule made earlier from up here on line 9. And it says, hey, we're going to do schedule job, which comes from the node schedule instructions. And we're passing in that rule that we created up here as well. Remember that rule was a new schedule with a recurrence rule, day of the week, time, and time zone. And then we have to pass in a function. And then we have the event emitter that makes it happen. We pass in that same function. And then it works. So that's the overview of the code. But what you guys are really here for is to learn how to use Linode, not how to write a Twitter bot. So let's move on and talk about how to use Linode. So here we are on the Linode main screen. This is what it looks like after you've signed in, created an account. You can see I'm using Metzen Around up here. And when you don't have any Linodes on here, when you don't have anything created yet, this is what it looks like. So let's go through how to create the Linode, what you need, and what we're going to put on there and how we're going to do it. So if we create Linode, it asks you the distribution, and we're going to stick with Ubuntu. Go with the most recent version. Pick a region that's closest to you. I'm down here in Orlando, where it's always hot, and so we're going to pick Atlanta. And then this is where you select your plan. You can see the cheapest is $5 a month, and it's actually called a nanode. It's only 1 gigabyte of RAM, $5 a month, and it's 25 gigabytes of storage. It is all that you need to run this. And in fact, you can run several bots on Linode all at the same time if you'd like. It's got the storage for it, and it doesn't take much RAM to really run these. So since we're looking at less than 100 lines of code and it's pretty quick to start up, it's your best option. $5 a month is amazing. It's really good. It's really customizable too. So let's talk about this label. I don't want the label to be my name. I want to call it, let's call it SNES Soundtracks. Okay. We're not worried about tags. This automatically tried to make a password for me, but I'm not going to use that. What I am going to use is a new password that I'm making up. Make sure it's nice and secure, and make sure that you remember it. That's really going to be the most important part. Nice and secure. Strength is good. You can attach a VLAN if you want. You can add a backup. You can make it a private IP. For our purposes, none of that's terribly important for us. What's most important is that password I created. So we're going to create the Linode. And then it goes through and it starts making a Linode for you. That sign-in was pretty straightforward, I think. No, LastPass, not now. But what it gives you is it gives you an IP address. It gives you the SSH access if you want. But what's really good about Linode and why I like it so much is that there's a list console right here that gives you direct access to it. You don't have to worry about opening up your own terminal. You can do it from inside the web page. Let's give this a chance to boot up and we'll come back in 1 second. So it looks like it's running. Now all we need to do is get our files that run our Super Nintendo soundtrack code onto our actual server that we just created, our little Ubuntu instance. First, we need to get in the list console, and we got to do a couple Ubuntu sort of housekeeping stuff first. So once you're in, it's going to say what's your login, and the localhost login is going to be root, and then that password you created earlier, that's why you need to remember it. And it says Ubuntu's got no warranty. This is all normal. Don't worry about it. What we do need to do is we need to make sure that this is updated. And so we're going to run apt update. All right, after that's all run, we're going to go apt dist dash upgrade. And it's going to ask if we want to continue. Yes, we do. It's going to run through and take care of all this stuff for us. Now that that's all done updating, we need to consider if we want to create a new user on this instance or if we want to just keep root. Again, I see this as a very basic tutorial, so we're going to keep root. If you're interested in creating a new user, which is often best practice, and giving them admin privileges, then you can follow a tutorial that's linked in the article that I wrote as well. But we're just going to keep root for now. So once we've got root, we need a way to put all of our files from where we're keeping them on our computer, on our local machine, onto this Ubuntu instance. And there's several ways you can do this, including having a repository on GitLab or on GitHub, or installing them yourself. And it can be a little bit complicated, but there's a really easy solution to all of this, and it's an app called FileZilla. So let's look at FileZilla. So here's FileZilla, and as you can see, it allows us to connect using a host, username, password, and a port, and it will take what we have on our computer and it will allow us to connect it and add to something else that we're connected on a server. So what we need is the host, which is going to be the IP address, the username, which is going to be root, that password you made before, and a port, which is going to be 22. That's the port we're going to use. So let's go ahead and head to here, we're going to copy our IP address, head back to FileZilla, host, root, the password, and the port 22, and we're going to say connect, please. That's going to ask, hey, this is an unknown host. Are you sure this is what you want? You make sure that this is what you copied from before, and we're going to double check real quick. 23.92.31.9. Yep, that's correct. And we're going to say it's okay. We can always trust this host. And it's going to connect us to what we have here. So this is great because it's good for newer people because this graphic interface allows you to see what's happening as opposed to typing on the terminal, which can be a little confusing for newer people. So we need to get our files that are actually going to run everything we need over here. So we need snes.js, which is similar to the index file that is usually the main file in a node.js application. We need the package.json, package.lock.json, config.env, and node modules. Now, you can install the node modules on your own through the terminal or through the lish, but I think it's easier now to just grab this file and click. Oh no, I lost it. SNES, package lock, package.json, these two, config.js, .env, and node modules. That's all you need. And we're going to click and drag them right over here. And we're just going to drop it. And it's going to transfer all those files over. We're going to let that happen for a little bit because I know especially node modules takes a while. So we'll come back once this is done. So everything finished up. If we head into our lish, we can actually type ls, and it'll show us all the things that we've just transferred over, which is perfect. That's what we need to run it. I've created a script that you can find in the Twitterbot tutorial that I created in the article underneath that lets me go like this, npm run develop, and it uses that .env, that environment. Did that not transfer over? That's not there. It's there. It just doesn't show up. Oh, .env doesn't show up because, you know. So now I'm going to use a script that runs using the .env environment. And as you can see, SNES soundtrack's booting up, and 17, these are the things that I told my code to console log, so we know that SNES is running. If we want to know for sure, though, we can go to Twitter, and we can tag our bot at SNES soundtracks. We're going to go ahead and put something in front of the tweet because sometimes if you start with an @ it thinks it's a reply and it doesn't work. So we're going to say, hey, at SNES Soundtracks, can I please have a video? And we're going to tweet. Now, we should be able to see in our log that something happens because it got tagged. See, it created an array that had the word please in it. So that makes player 2 true. And it says, the bot tells us, hey, I just tweeted at this guy. And I said, here you go, and gave him this. So let's go here. Let's find our tweet. And let's see our comment. And he gave us, TMNT4, Turtles in Time. I played that game so much when I was a kid. I have vivid memories of playing it at my friend's house. Great soundtrack, amazing game. Go out and play it. But that covers it. It is running. You can just exit out of the weblish, and it keeps running in the background. And as long as you tag it, it'll keep showing up. I'm going to say, hey, thanks, SNES Soundtrack. Appreciate your time. But that's all for this. You now know how to host a Twitter bot on Linode, which is great. And we look forward to seeing what you guys create and put up there. Thanks so much, and see you soon.